Happy Sunday. So today I am really excited and I can't wait to share the nuggets that I have from this week. I can't wait to just express to you how much God has revealed to me and how much joy it has given me. And I just pray today that it will do the same for you, and that the joy that I felt and the confidence that I felt in this study and God, the revelations that God gave me in my study, that it does the same for you, because ultimately that is my goal, that not only that you draw closer to God, but that as we share in our spiritual journeys together, that we are actually deepening our relationship with God and finding joy and peace in this time. So I read this week chapter 12, Sounds Like a Plan, in Priscilla Shirer's Discerning the Voice of God. I'm going to give a few nuggets from that. Then I'll go ahead and go into the study that this led me to. So my study this week was grounded in Luke 1:13, and then 16 and 17. But I'm going to read Luke 1:13 through 17. But first, I want to share a few nuggets from Discerning the Voice of God, chapter 12. So when we think about the plan that God has for us in our lives, it is really much deeper than we probably think about it, because we probably don't give a lot of thought into that. But I know I haven't. I can only speak for myself. I know I always think, God, what is your plan for me? But sometimes when you read deeper and when you dig deeper, things are revealed to you that you probably never even thought about. And I want to talk about that right now. So she starts out talking about accepting God's invitation to join him in his work. Okay, so before we're even born, before we're even brought into this world, before we're in our mother's womb, God had already had a plan for us. He had an agenda for our careers, for our families, for our finances. And that plan has already been orchestrated. Whether or not we see that or not, is all depending upon whether or not we submit to his will. And so one thing I love how she started off the chapter talking about giving us or reminding us of our perfect example, and that is Jesus. Jesus not only did his Father's will, he not only did his will, we know that, but he did his will and nothing else. So his life was centered around nothing but God's will. How powerful, and what a great reminder to us that is our example, and it's in the Word, all in the Word, for us to be reminded of that. So I want to start off saying, like, will you participate in God's plan for you? Will you actually be an active participant in his plan? Thinking about our lives on a daily basis, our practical lives, like, we are most effective when we're engaged, when we're fully engaged with the things that he's put us here to do. We are most effective when we're fully engaged in the things that God has put us here to do. So when you are engaged, you're busy, you're occupied. So yes, we're all running around here busy. We're all running around here occupied all day long with work and with all the affairs of life. But are we occupied with the things? Are we engaged with the things that he put us here to do? And the question is, have we even sought those things? Have we asked God, what is your plan for me? Or are we just living this life? And so one thing that has been in the forefront of my mind for the last several years is being intentional. But not just being intentional in the daily affairs of my life, but being intentional with God's plan and being intentional with the things that God has for me and for my family. A lot of times we do things and we don't really realize that our plans are falling flat. We realize that our plans are falling flat, but we don't know why. And the reason why is because we're making our own plans. So our plans fall flat when we make our plans not based on what God had planned for us, but we're trying to do it on our own. So our prayer needs to be for us to ask God to open our eyes to see where he is working in our lives, so we can be actively engaged in that. Something that is important to know is that nothing can stand in the way of God's agenda. But it's up to us whether or not we submit to his plan and be a part of that agenda. Because we have free will. So of course we have a choice. We can either be a part of his plan or we can do our own thing. And when we do our own thing, we can rest assured that it will fall flat. We miss out on the best that God has for us when we do our own thing. So we're shortchanging ourselves. She said something that was pretty powerful. His plan is better than anything that we can cook up in our own imagination. So we think we have these wonderful plans for ourselves, and we think we got it going on with these things that we've created in our minds, we've cooked up in our imagination. But what we don't know is we're shortchanging ourselves when we don't submit to God's will, because his plan is better than what we can imagine. He will exceed our expectations. How exciting is that? How exciting is that reminder? Thinking about your present situation and thinking about where you are in your life right now. A lot of times we sit and we think, I want out of this situation. I want to be doing something different. I want another job. I want to be married. I want to be whatever. I want this. I want that. Well, instead of wishing ourselves into better situations than we're already in, we need to ask God to open our eyes to the places to the place that we're already in right here, and show us how he can move in the current situation that we're in. So I want to say that over because it probably sounded confusing. Instead of wishing ourselves into better situations that we're already in, we need to ask God to open our eyes to the plan that's already right here. Because a lot of times we're overlooking the plan because we're so busy looking ahead and trying to get out of this current situation. Now that takes us into timing. God orchestrates perfect timing. So we know he has a plan for us. Plans happen over a period of time, right? We have a timing in our own minds. We have created, we want this done by then. But that has nothing to do with the time. That has nothing to do with the time that God has planned for that to happen. His timing is perfect. I was watching Dr. Stanley the other day, and he said that God's timing isn't good, it's perfect. So a lot of times we're thinking, what's taking so long? I'm behind. God is never behind schedule, not ever. He is always working within his perfect timing. So it doesn't matter what our little human minds cook up and think is the perfect timing. That's not important. What's important is his timing. And a lot of times when we think that we're being shortchanged or something isn't happening to us, a lot of times we're comparing ourselves to others. We may not be spiritually or emotionally equipped to handle the demands of something that we're asking for in the time that we are. So for instance, if God gives it to us too early before his timing, or if we jump into it too early, we can shortchange by not giving God the glory. We can shortchange ourselves, and we never want something to happen in an instance where we're not giving God the glory. Or we're just not spiritually or emotionally equipped for that situation at the time. I think about how when I was in the classroom for 20 years or 19 years, praying, a lot of times not being actively engaged in seeking other employment, but God kept me there for a reason, and his perfect timing was when he released me from that and blessed me with what he blessed me with, which was my promotion. I think about how the year before I applied for the job that I have now, I didn't get the job, and I just kept wondering, why, God? I've been in here, I feel like I've been faithful to you and I've been praying, but now in retrospect, I know that the timing was so perfect. God got the glory in my life and my situation, and he's still receiving the glory to this day. He still receives the glory in my testimony. And I have to share that testimony every single chance or platform that I have the opportunity to, because God worked that out in his perfect time, and he orchestrated all of that. He was so present in my testimony, in my career move, that no one can doubt that it was him. And I always give him the glory. So if we want to experience the fullness of his plan for us, we have to trust that his timing is perfect. and we cannot rush ahead. There were many times that I wanted to just quit teaching education. I wanted to quit my job. Then I would have been left without my retirement. I would have been left without the promotion that I have now. I'm so close to actually being able to retire. But had I quit before God's perfect timing of releasing me and giving me my promotion, I would have shortchanged myself. So I hope that this testimony really does resonate with you, because it's truly what God, it's truly how God worked in my life, and it's truly what I have to share with you in my life. He's not done yet. There's still many more things that he has for me. But right now, that is what I have to share. And that's what I rejoice in every single day. When we ask for his will sometimes, and we're asking him to show us, basically asking for a glimpse of the future. In the chapter, she talks about how he withholds certain little bits of information from us because we may do the wrong thing with it. If he tells us what's to come sometimes, we may run and jump ahead of ourselves and do something that we shouldn't do yet, or jump into a situation that we're prematurely prepared for or ill prepared for. Another thing that you can always look at as an indicator is if you don't know yet, you don't need to move forward with it. If you don't know the answer, that's your cue. That's your red flag that you don't need to move forward with it. What he wants to accomplish in our lives is so much more, than what we have in our minds. He exceeds our expectations. I want to share one thing before I go into the scripture, because I want to keep this under 15 minutes. But yesterday, I was in the car and I was worshiping God. I was listening to Promise Keeper by Fred Hammond. And as the tears flowed, it was such a wonderful, beautiful, joyous reminder that no matter what, God is a promise keeper. His word gives us the promises. And so that song, one of the lyrics is that heaven and earth shall pass away before one word he speaks will ever fade. He exceeds all of our expectations. So as I worshiped him and I meditated on that, it gave me such joy. No matter what, we're created for such a time as this. No matter what is to come, it was in the plan. We're here. God created us for such a time as this. So quickly, I want to go into where this led in. This was Luke 1:13. So I'm going to read it real quick. So Zacharias and Elizabeth, I'm going to give a little background information first, because I always dig deeper and read deeper. So Zacharias and Elizabeth had been praying and praying and praying for a baby. They were well up into age, like it is said that they were like in their 60s. And so these were two upright people. The word tells us that they were upright in the sight of God. They lived upright, and this is just notes that I take from my study. So they lived upright, and regardless of their status, they were actually in the upper class. They were in the priesthood, and they were not proud people. They lived right in the sight of God, not just man. They submitted to God's will. Zacharias and Elizabeth had been praying and praying for a baby. And so when I dug a little deeper and read some of the biblical scholars' points about them, a lot of people were starting to question whether or not these two people were secretly living in, they were suspecting whether or not they were living in sin because they had not been blessed with a baby. And Zacharias actually had I said he could have divorced her according to what I read, but he did not. He persisted and he waited for God's perfect timing. He could have divorced her to the fact that she didn't have his child, but instead he prayed and he prayed, and he continued to live upright, and he continued to submit himself to God's will. So Luke 1:13 says, "But the angel said unto him, Fear not, Zacharias, for thy prayer is heard. And thy wife Elizabeth shall bear thee a son, and thou shalt call his name John the Baptist. And thou shalt have joy and gladness, and many shall rejoice at his birth. For he shall be great in the sight of the Lord, and shall drink neither wine nor strong drink, and shall be filled with the Holy Ghost, even from his mother's womb. And many of the children of Israel shall he turn to the Lord their God, and he shall go before him in the spirit and power of Elias, to turn the hearts of fathers to children, and the disobedient to the wisdom of the just, to make ready a people prepared for the Lord. He was the forerunner of the Messiah. I just want to end with saying that Zacharias and Elizabeth waited for God's perfect timing. Had he divorced his wife, had he gotten out of the will of God, they would not have had John the Baptist, the forerunner of the Messiah, who Jesus himself referred to as one of the greatest of men. And you think about how we probably shortchange ourselves so much in this life by not really submitting to his plan and doing our own thing. And it's a scary thought, but at the same time, it's a very comforting thought that if we just submit to him, we will, the good things that he has planned for us will be manifested in our lives. I created one action step, and that comes directly from the book. I didn't actually create this, but I'm gonna take on and adopt this action step, and that is to zero in on what I know that I'm supposed to be doing and get busy doing it. I want to be engaged in what God has planned for me. I want to be a part of it. I want to accept the invitation. So I just want to challenge you and encourage you to accept the invitation that God has for your life. An invitation to be actively engaged in the plan that he has for you. I just ask right now that if we can just end in prayer. I ask, Lord, that you reveal your plans to us. But Lord, you help us to be so intentional. You help us to be intentional by reading your word, revealing the promises that you have for us. And Lord, I ask you that you touch every single person that is watching this, Lord, and that you reveal to them what it is that you have for them to do in such a time as this, God. Lord, that you help us to be spiritually aware of what it is that you would have us to do. Help us to submit to your will, God, and help us to be in peace, not to rush, but to wait on your perfect timing and to be patient. And I'll end with this verse, Psalm 27:14. This went longer than I wanted it to, but I was so excited about this week. Psalm 27:14 says, "Wait for the Lord, be strong, and let your heart take courage. Wait for the Lord." He said it twice, wait for the Lord. So in other words, that's paramount. God's perfect timing. Waiting on God is paramount because his timing is significant. But that takes courage. It's easier to just do what you want to do when you want to, but it takes more courage to say, Lord, I trust you to do this in your timing. Be blessed.